My cousin Nate is in the Coast Guard and has been for over a decade. He's not the kind of guy to lie or make things up. He's one of the most straightforward I know. Real grounded and not superstitious. Not into horror. Just a practical guy who likes boats and order. He told me this story in the summer of 2022. I asked him to repeat it more, balance, because of how messed up it was. And every time the details stayed these. This happened back in 2017, when he was assigned to a lighthouse off the coast of Maine on a 2-maintenance rotation. The place was called Matanu's Rock, and it's way out there. You can't only get to it by boat or helicopter. It's nothing more than a jagged rocky island with a single lighthouse and an auxiliary building that stores fuel and maintenance equipment. There is no power grid, no plumbing, and barely any signal. The lighthouse itself is automated, but it still requires occasional manual upkeep, which is why the Coast Guard sends people out to it for a year or so. Usually, it's a solo assignment, but there had been strange electrical failures the year before. So, for this trip, they decided to send 2 people, Nate and another guy named Russell. The first few days were fine, windy, boring, and repetitive. During the day, they checked the beacon mechanics, test the emergency batteries, refill the diesel generator, and scrape off layers of salt corrosion from the meadow interior. At night, they'd read, eat simple meals, and kill time playing cards. It was isolation, but it was expected, no red flags. Then, on their 4th night, Nate woke up around 2:00 in the morning feeling weird. Not sick, not in pain, just like something was wrong with the atmosphere. The air was heavier than usual, and Hesed had felt like standing in a room right before a thunderstorm, except Desky was clear and silent outside. He sat up and looked around. It was dark. Anthon, he noticed something. There was no rotation from the beacon. The lighthouse was supposed to send out a sweeping light beam every few seconds, even during maintenance. It was a huge deal if the light failed. He got up and shook Russell awake, and the 2 of them made their way up the narrow spiral staircase, the top of the tower, to see what was going on. When they got up there, they found the gears that rotated the beacon were still moving, but the actual light itself wasn't turning. Something was jammed in the mechanism. It was a dark piece of cloth, like a blanket or an old coat wedged deep into the gear assembly. The thing was soaked, covered in the slimy, mossy substance, and it smelled like rotting seaweed and mildew. They were both confused. The door had been locked, and the windows were sealed. No wind or birds. It didn't make sense. So they removed the fabric, tossed it outside into the wind, and went back to bed, thinking it was just some bizarre, one-off incident. The next night, the exact same thing happened again, around the same time, just after 2. Nate woke up and saw that the beacon wasn't turning. They went up and found another piece of cloth jammed into the same mechanism. Only this time, it wasn't the same type of fabric. It was more looked like an old-fashioned scarf or a shawl. It was red, frayed at the edges, and soaked through with what looked like sea ocean water. It even had tiny crustaceans clinging to it, like ether had just come out of the sea. Nate said that was the moment things stopped feeling coincidental. They checked the doors, the windows, the supply closet, but everything was secure. Now, they were starting to wonder if someone was messing with them. Or worse, if something had gotten into the lighthouse and was deliberately trying to screw with the lights. From that night on, they began blocking the stairwell with heavy crates. After doing the final check upstairs, they locked the beacon room and the bottom entrance. But on the 7th night, something happened that Nate still persists to try to explain. He said he was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep. He heard Russell whispering from across the room, but he wasn't talking to Nate. He was murmuring to the corner off the room, saying strange disconnected things, like someone was standing there. Nate leaned up and asked what he was saying, and Russell blinked slowly and looked confused. He told Nate he wasn't saying anything, but later that night, Nate woke again and found Russell sitting at the window, staring down at the rocks below. When he asked what Hal was doing, Russell said he thought he saw someone standing down there on Therex the night before, barely visibling the edge of the beacon light. He said it looked like someone was watching the mond, then disappeared when the light rotated back. After that, Things started spiraling. Russell got weirder every day. He stopped sleeping, stopped hooking much, and just stared out the window for hours. Nate asked him if he was okay, and Russell would just mutter about noises in the wall or bothering voices from inside their stairwell. On the 9th night, they bothered footsteps on the stairs. Not usual creaking from the wind, but real deliberate footsteps, one after the other, coming down from the beacon room above. Nate looked over and saw Russell standing at the bottom of their stairs, frozen and staring up. He asked him if he'd gone up there, and Russell just looked at him and said no. Then he asked if Nate had. Neither of them had moved. They stood there listening. But footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was even worse. That night, they shoved a dresser in front of their bedroom door and slept with knives under their pillows. On the 11th night, they were woken up again by the beacon failing. This time, when they reassured the top of the lighthouse, the beacon room door was wide open. Not just unlocked, not just cracked open, completely swung open like someone had kicked it. And the wind was howling through. And when they got inside, the beacon wasn't just stopped, it had been deliberately tampered with. The bulb was unscrewed and placed upright in the middle of the room. That thing is industrial grade. You can't just twist it off by hand without effort. Nate stared at it, terrified, while Russell just kept muttering that someone hadn't it. Then Nate felt something brush against his back. Something cold, spun around, but no one was there. Russell had gone pale. He just kept pointing at the wall, whispering that he saw a hand come out of the bricks. There and back down the stairs and locked themselves in the bedroom. Nate didn't sleep at all. Russell started rocking back and forth in the corner, whispering to someone who wasn't there. The next morning, Nate used the emergency siphon and called for an early pickup, saying there had been a serious mechanical failure. The boat showed up that afternoon, but here's the creepiest part. When they arrived, the crew scattered them about the distress call they had made at 2:12 a.m. that morning, but Nate had never made any call. He didn't touch phone until daylight. The deckhand said they'd received a garbled call that came through with static and a voice saying something about someone buying Thor with them. Then it cut out. Russell didn't speak the entire ride back. He quit the Coast Guard a few months later and never told anyone what really happened out there. Nate still does maintenance duty sometimes, but says he'll never ever go back to maintenance rack. This happened during COVID lockdowns. It was around the point of it where Orion was really getting sick of it, going stir-crazy, cooped up in their houses with nothing to do. I was single at the time and was swiping on Tinder and just DMing people while watching movies and shows, because really, what else was there to do on a weeknight during lockdown? I struck up a conversation with some girl I'd been following on Instagram for years. Her name was Sophia. She goes by Soph. We live in Suffolk County, Long Island, New York, about 20 minutes to half an hour from the Hamptons and like an hour from Montauk. We were bored one night and agreed to hang out. She lives like 5 minutes from me, conveniently. So, I picked her up. We went for a drive to an RV park that was closed, and we just drank White Claws there. I immediately telegate the vibe. She was a little bellious, but like in a cool way. She was down to hop fences and trespass endo, things like that. There was a mutual connection very quickly, and within less than an hour, she came up with the idea of driving out to Montauk and walking the cliff walk around the lighthouse. Technically, the lighthouse grounds were closed past sunset. I think they may have been closed in general during lockdown. Not 100% sure on that. But right away, I said I was down. I like adventures like that. So, we finished our drinks and drove all the way out us to Mock Point. When we got there, she told me to just park in the lighthouse parking lot. I was a bit hesitant about this, but just seemed pretty confident that there would no security on a random Tuesday night during lockdown in the off-season. Man, I didn't see any cars in sight, so I took her word for it. She said she'd done this before, even before SEO Keywords, and had another White Claw in the parking lot. I would nervously look around from time to time, making sure no security vehicles were scoping the place out, and she would tell me to relax. We eventually started walking over Tough Lighthouse, Seeing a lighthouse at night so closely and just staring up at it, it's so cool, but it's also a biter. Can't explain it, but there's some mething kind of lenal about it. So, fled the way. I guess it was a bit out off the way of the actual entrance. Just so we wouldn't be walking directly into the light and potentially exposing Gorsels. This was my first time ever at the Montauk Lighthouse. She led us straight to the cliffside behind the Lighthouse that had a bunch of rocks forming a trail of sorts called the Cliff Walk. We were navigating solely with our flashlights. Maybe there were supposed to be lights on down there, but that night, mostly everything was off besides a few lights by the front entrance, and of course the lighthouse.